Hello, Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Dirshu Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Hey. We're going to be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Kuf Mem Amid Beis and Kuf Mem Aleph Amid Aleph. So hopefully we'll pick up a day on the Dirshu schedule. We begin today on the bottom line of Kuf Mem Amid Aleph with the beginning of a brand new Siman, the beginning of Siman Taf Kuf Yud Ches. Dine hotza'ah me rishus l'rishus b'Yom Tov, the halachas that govern hotza'ah, what we colloquially call carrying on Yom Tov. Ubai tes seifim, and here we have 9 seifim. Says the Mechaber in Sif Aleph. The Mechaber starts off with a golden rule that we've discussed many times already since the beginning of Hilchos Yom Tov, but I think this might be the first time we've actually encountered it in the words of the Mechaber. Says the Mechaber in Sif Aleph, mitoich shehutra hotza'ah l'tzarich, since the malacha of hotza'ah was rendered mutter by the Torah for the tzarich, for the need of eichel nefesh, l'tzarich achila, hutra shalai l'tzarich. It is also considered mutter when it's not for a tzarich eichel nefesh. Now let's dive right away into the Mishnah Berurah on the bottom of Kuf Mem Amud Aleph. Mishnah Berurah is Katan Aleph. Because the Torah was matter the malacha of hotza'ah l'tzarich eichel nefesh, it's also mutter when it's not l'tzarich eichel nefesh. Says the Chavetz Chaim, v'chein hadin b'havara, the same halacha, the same rule of mitoich applies to the malacha of havara, the malacha of making a fire, ushchita, or the malacha of slaughtering, va'afia, or baking, ubishul, or cooking. Shehem malachos hashayachos l'eichel nefesh. All of these are malachas that are required for eichel nefesh. If you want to eat a chicken, you have to shecht it first. So shchita is mutter l'tzarich eichel nefesh. Then you need to cook the soup. So bishul is mutter for eichel nefesh. You need to bake challah. So baking is mutter for eichel nefesh. Now the Mishnah Berurah doesn't mention all of the malachas over here that are mutter for eichel nefesh. There's a whole list of malachas that are mutter for eichel nefesh. And by all of these malachas that are mutter, l'tzarich eichel nefesh on Yom Tov, they're also mutter shaloi l'tzarich eichel nefesh. They're also mutter for other purposes as well. Now there's going to be a caveat to that. So let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says. So v'chein adin b'havara u'shchita v'afia u'bishul. The same halacha applies to the malachas of havara, shchita, afia, bishul, and other malachas as well. Shehem malachos hashayachos l'eichel nefesh. These are all malachas that are requirements for eichel nefesh, and therefore the Torah was matter them for the needs of eichel nefesh. Amrinan buhu, we say by all of these malachas mitoich. We say the rule of mitoich. So once we have a pasuk that was matir malachas that are required for eichel nefesh, we learn out that they're not only mutter for eichel nefesh, they're mutter for other purposes as well. Da'af tiksiv, the Mishnah Berurah continues on Kuf Mem Amid Beis. Da'af tiksiv, although it's written in the pasuk, literally what the pasuk means is only the malachas that are required for food for any person, those are the only malachas that are mutter for you to do. So just from the pasuk alone, it seems that yes, the malachas that are required for eichel nefesh are mutter, but they're only mutter for eichel nefesh. Only what's required for food for any person. Those are the only things that may be done. So yes, you're right. Afia, baking, is required for eichel nefesh, but maybe we're only mater afia for eichel nefesh. Who says we're mater afia for anything else? Who says we're mater bishul or havara for anything else? Nonetheless, continues the Chavetz Chaim, Kiblu Chazal, the Chazal were makabel, the Chazal understood the kavana who that the real kavana of this pasuk, the intent of the pasuk is Oisan malachos haragilos lehayasais l'tzarich eichel nefesh. Those malachas that are typically performed for eichel nefesh, afilu im ata ein kavanasa l'tzarich achila, even if you are now performing that malacha not for the requirements of achila. You're lighting a candle because you need a light. You're not lighting a candle because you want to make a fire to cook with. So the havara that you're doing now is not a havara for eichel nefesh. Still, he tira HaTorah. Still, in all, the Torah was matter the malacha of havara. So again, the Chazal say that when the pasuk says it doesn't mean that you're only allowed to do these malachas when you're doing them for eichel nefesh. It means any type of malacha that is typically performed for eichel nefesh may be performed for another tzarech as well. It doesn't have to be for the tzarech of eichel nefesh. Yet the Mishnah Berurah says, look further on in the Ramah that we're going to see soon, where the Ramah over here, where we're discussing hotza'ah, the Ramah says the be'inon sheyehei al kol panim tzarech tzas. There still does have to be a tzarech. So yes, you're allowed to light a candle because you need light, but you're not allowed to light a candle for no reason at all. So yes, it doesn't have to be for cooking. It doesn't have to be that the havara that you're doing is for eichel nefesh, but it can't be that you do havara for no purpose at all. There has to be a tzarech tzas. There has to be some Yom Tov need. There has to be some need for today, for now, that you're making that fire. Otherwise, it would be asur. And the same rule applies not only to hotza'ah. The Ramah says this over here in this Siman by hotza'ah, that yes, hotza'ah is mutter l'eichel nefesh, and therefore it's also mutter for other things as well. But the Ramah says there still has to be epis tzarech. That same rule applies to all of the other malachas that are mutter on Yom Tov also. So like we said, havara is mutter on Yom Tov l'tzarech eichel nefesh. It's also mutter shaloi l'tzarech eichel nefesh, but there does have to be a tzarech tzas. There does have to be some level of tzarech. Eis cotton bays, hutra shaloi l'tzarech. Afilu lahitzi eisai l'rishus harabim v'chol sheked l'karmelis. The Mishnah Berurah points out that when the Mechaber says that hotza'ah is mutter shaloi l'tzarech also, we're not only talking about hotza'ah d'Rabbanan of, let's say, going out to a karmelis, we're even talking about hotza'ah d'Oraisa. You're allowed to transfer something from a rishus hayachid to a rishus harabim, or vice versa, which is real bona fide hotza'ah d'Oraisa. It's mutter on Yom Tov, even shaloi l'tzarech eichel nefesh, as long as there is a tzarech tzas. Now let's go back up to the Mechaber. The Mechaber continues here on Kuf Mem Amud Beis. Kigain, for example, what are some examples of when hotza'ah is mutter on Yom Tov? Kigain katan, you're allowed to take out a child. If you want to carry your baby, you're allowed to carry your baby outside from the house to the Rishus Harabim, and you're allowed to carry your baby Dalet Amos in Rishus Harabim on Yom Tov. Velulav, if it's Sukkos, you're allowed to carry your Dalet Minim. You can carry your Lulav and Esrog. The Sefer Torah. If you need a Sefer Torah for Kriyas HaTorah, you're allowed to do hotza'ah with a Sefer Torah. The Kalim, and you're allowed to carry Kalim. You want to carry pots and pans, a cup, a mug. You want to carry a kais outside to the Rishus Harabim and in the Rishus Harabim, you may. Let's see the Ramah right away. At least the first words of the Ramah here. Haga hatzrichim loik tzas. When the Mechaber says that you're allowed to carry kalim, that you're allowed to perform the malacha of hotza'ah with kalim, says the Ramah, they have to be kalim atzrichim like tzas. Again, you can't carry it for no purpose at all. So you can't just go out in the street and say, hey, yeah, I might as well carry this cup with me. Why not? I was drinking a coffee and, I forgot to put it down, so I'll just carry it. If you're carrying it for no reason at all, that's hotza'ah shaloi l'tzarech mamish. You're not allowed to do that. It has to be tzrichim like tzas. There has to be some level of a purpose, of a Yom Tov need for the carrying of those kalim. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah is cotton gimel. The Mechaber said, "Kigoin katan." You're allowed to carry a child. Says the Chavetz Chaim, "Loi mebaya." We don't need to say the amlo yotzia yivke. In a case where if you don't take the baby, let's say mommy is going out to visit a friend, and mommy gets to the door to go out, and the baby is crying and crying and crying, so the baby is miserable. V'yitztayer ha'av al yedei zeh. So the mommy or the daddy is going to be bitzar because the baby is crying and crying and crying. Bevadei mutter. So then certainly it's mutter to carry the baby. That's mamish tzarech Yom Tov. If you don't take the baby is going to be crying. So then mommy who's going out for a walk is going to be bitzar because she knows she left her crying baby. The baby is going to be in tsar. Daddy who's still home is going to be bitzar. So over there's definitely a tzarech Yom Tov. You have to carry the baby. Ela afilu im yachal lahanicha yetzel imay v'lo yivke. The Chavetz Chaim says, let's say daddy is leaving the house and the baby, and he doesn't have to take the baby with him. He could leave the baby with mommy, and the baby will be perfectly happy with mommy. So maybe the father should just go and not take the child with him. Why does he have to take the child with him? Nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, im yesh la'av gaguim al benoi, if the father is very emotionally attached to his child and he wants to take the child, and the father is very happy to take the child out for a walk, and if he doesn't, he's going to miss the child, gamken mutter. That's mutter, even if he's not necessarily going to miss him. That's not. I want to be careful to translate exactly as the Chavetz Chaim says. The Chavetz Chaim says, Daddy is going out for a walk, and it will give Daddy pleasure to take the child with him. So really, he could leave the child at home, and the child's not going to cry. So there's going to be nobody's going to be upset. The child's not going to be upset. Mommy who's staying home with the child isn't going to be upset. Daddy who's going out is also not really going to be upset. But he wants to take pleasure in taking the child for a walk. So he wants to take the child for a walk. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Gam Kein Mutter. That's mutter to who's Simchas Yom Tov. Because in that case, taking the child out for a walk is part of Simchas Yom Tov. It's going to give you enjoyment on Yom Tov to take your child out for a walk. Then Mikri Tzarech Hayom. That's called a Tzarech Hayom. It's a Tzarech Ktsas, and therefore it's mutter on Yom Tov. Ois Katan Dalet, the other examples the Mechaber gave were Valulav and Sefer Torah. You're allowed to carry out on Sukkot your Dalet Minim. You can take your Lulav, or if you need a Sefer Torah, you could take a Sefer Torah. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Lulav Lotzei Spoi. You're taking out your Lulav and Esrik to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Dalet Minim. So that's certainly a Tzarech Yom Tov. It's certainly a Tzarech Hayom. The Sefer Torah Likreis by Hayom. Or you want to carry a Sefer Torah to Shul because they need a Sefer Torah in Shul for laning. So that's also, it's a Tzarech Hayom, it's a Tzarech Mitzvah, to a Tzarech Mitzvah. Ois Katan Hey, the Ramah said, Hatzrichen like Tzas, L'Yom Tov. The Chavetz Chaim says, when the Ramah says that you're allowed to carry Kalim, if there's some level of a Tzarech, Hatzrichen like Tzas, the Chavetz Chaim explains that when the Ramah says Hatzrichen like Tzas, that he has a need for L'Yom Tov, it's a Yom Tov need. In other words, he's carrying the Sefer Torah to Shul because they need it to lane today. Or the Kalim, he's carrying the Keli because he's going to eat somewhere and they need a big serving bowl. They need a big salad bowl where he's going. So that's a Tzarech Yom Tov. It's for the Yom Tov Suda. Va'kelim koi. The Chavetz Chaim is pointing out, I got a little sidetracked here at the beginning of this, but when this Mishnah Berurah here is going on the Ramah, the Mechaber said you're allowed to carry cotton lulav Sefer Torah v'kelim. And the Ramah said, Hatzrichim like tzas. The Chavetz Chaim is pointing out that those words, Hatzrichim like tzas in the Ramah, goes back on the case of kelim. And the Chavetz Chaim is saying, Hatzrichim like tzas liyom tov. We're talking about a keli that you have a Yom Tov need for. So like I said, you're going to a friend for a Yom Tov Suda, and you know that they need a large salad bowl. So you want to bring a large salad bowl with you for the Yom Tov Suda. So that's a Tzarech Yom Tov. Va'kelim kai. These words of the Ramah go back on the case of the Mechaber where he said you could carry kelim. Va'afilu ein tzarech lehen rak l'shem tachshit lehiskashit b'hem. Or you could do hotza'ah, you could perform the malacha of hotza'ah even on something that's not a salad bowl, even if it's only a tachshit, even if it's only you're dressing up and you're putting on something fancy. But if you want to carry something that has no tzarech yom tov at all, so then it's going to have the din, what the Mechaber is going to say coming up on Kuf Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, was something like stones. You can't just bend down, pick up a stone, and carry a stone on Yom Tov Shaloi L'Tzarech. What are you carrying it for? For no reason at all, you're not allowed to do that. So that's why the Mishnah Berurah says here, Shaloi L'Tzarech Klal, you want to carry a keli for absolutely no reason at all, that would be also heavy, like Kavonim. The Kasva Paiskim and the Paiskim write, to who adin the mutar lahitzi hamavteach shesayger by ha'oichlin ay hakelim shetzarich la'isei hayoim im yarei lahanicha bebeisai. Let's say you have kelim, you have dishes, you have spoons, forks, knives, you have a silver kais, and you keep them locked up in a closet. And you're afraid you need to take, you want to lock it, and you want to take the key with you. You have some kind of a storage area where you have all of these kelim and you're leaving. You want to lock the door and you want to take the key with you. You're afraid to leave the key there. You're afraid to leave the locker open because you're afraid that your kelim are going to get stolen. So that's also considered a tzarech. So you're allowed to carry that key with you. Now let's continue in the words of the Ramah here on Kuf Bam Aleph Amud Aleph, the top line. Or you want to carry kalim with you because you're afraid if you leave your kalim where they are, they're going to get stolen. Somehow you have a keli in a place that's open to the public, and you're afraid it might get stolen. So it's true, you don't need, let's say you have a kais, and you don't need the kais. And where you're going, you know that they have kaises. So there's really no need for you to carry the kais. But what are you going to do with the kais? You don't have a place to leave the kais. If you leave the kais is going to get stolen. I guess, let's say a case of this would be, let's say you had a kais in shul for a kiddush, and the shul is open. It's a Rishus Harabim. The doors are unlocked all day on Yom Tov. Maybe it's a shul that's not a bismedrash. There's nobody in the shul all day long. So you brought the kais to shul before Yom Tov for the kiddush. Now you're going for the Suda. It's after davening. You're leaving for the Suda. What are you going to do with the kais? You don't have a place to leave the kais, so you want to take the kais home with you. Otherwise, you're afraid it's going to get stolen. So that's what the Ramah is saying here. You're allowed to carry if you have a keli and you want to carry it with you home because you're afraid lest it gets stolen. A sharp seda, or you have another case of loss where you need to carry something because otherwise you're afraid you might take a loss. The Ramah says that's mutter. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cotton vav shelo yignevu. You want to carry something so that it should not be stolen. Im yashirein b'mekayman. You're afraid if you leave it where it is, it might get stolen. And this is true even if it's not a kais. A kais at least is a keli that is usable for eichel nefesh. It's something that you drink from. But let's say it's a keli that has nothing to do with eichel nefesh. It's some other kind of keli. I don't know. I'm trying to think of, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank right now. A keli that has nothing to do with eichel nefesh. You had a beautiful, boy, why am I drawing such a blank? A keli that's not a food keli. Some kind of keli that has nothing to do with eichel nefesh. Okay, a stroller. You have a stroller, and somehow you don't have to transport the kid home in the stroller, but the stroller was in shul. So somehow a stroller ended up in shul, and it's an expensive stroller. It's one of these, I don't know what they call them, dugas, bugas. I don't know what they call these $600, $800, $1,000 strollers that they have now. They should at least be self-propelled. Duna, I don't know what they're called. I'm past that stage. But they have these strollers that are $1,000, $1,500. So you have your stroller is in shul, and you're not taking a kid home in the stroller. And there's nothing to do with eichel nefesh, a stroller. So it's a keli. You're afraid to leave it here in the shul where it might get stolen. So you want to take it home. So that's what the Mishnah Berurah is saying over here. You could transport it, even though this is a keli that has nothing to do with eichel nefesh. Continues the Mishnah Berurah, and he says, and we tam zen for the same reason, mutter gamkein lahitzi mafteach shel hateva shamunach sham ma'osav im yarei lahanichai sham bebeisai. Let's say you have a safe. You have a little safe at home that you keep your money locked up in. And you're afraid that somebody might get access to the house, or I don't know, maybe you have a locker in shul where you have valuables over there. And now you don't want to leave the key over there in shul. You're afraid somebody might get hold of the key, might open it up and steal stuff from it. So you're allowed to take the key. You're allowed to take the key with you. The kevon, and this is, I think, the rule over here, says the Mishnah Berurah, the kevon the liboy dayegu mitztar al zeh. Because since if you do not transport the key, you're going to have nerves, you're going to be worrying about this. Therefore, the transporting of the key, the hotza'ah on the key is considered tzarech einig Yom Tov. So if you have a key lock on your house and everybody is leaving the house and you want to go walk out in the Rishus Harabim now on Yom Tov, so you say to yourself, I got to lock the house. What am I going to do with the key? I don't have a good place to leave the key. So I have to lock the house and I have to take the key with me. Now, even though maybe I'm leaving now in the morning and I'm not going to come back until who knows when. I'm not going to come back until this day of Yom Tov is over. You see, if I was coming back in an hour, so at least you could at least say that I need to have the key because I need to get back into the house. And maybe there's no place right outside the door to leave it. You have to take it out into the Rishus HaRabim. So maybe the hotza'ah is l'tzarech later. But sometimes you have even that the hotza'ah is not, if what I was saying true, if the hotza'ah is not, let's say I'm not coming home until tonight, so it's going to be already the second day Yom Tov. So there's no tzarech. I don't have a tzarech for today that I have to get back into the house with the key. But there's a different tzarech. The tzarech is that if I don't lock the door and take the key with me, I'm going to have nervin. I'm going to be worried all day that somebody's going to break into my house. So I have to lock the door, and I don't have anything to do with the key. So I have to transport the key. What am I going to do? They came in the libay doig with star all there, because I have nothing to do with the key. However, the Mishnah says, "V'dabit, you should know the yesh kama paiskim. There are many paiskim shecholkin al zeh who argue on this. The sovereign and they hold the leihutar hotza'ah elul tzarech eichel nefesh mamish, that hotza'ah is only mutter for direct purposes of eichel nefesh. Oy tzarech mitzvah, or for a tzarech mitzvah, ushar dvarim hashayachim la'isa yom, or other things that are mamish necessary for today. The chanal avaloi b'shvil hefsid mammon." But you want to do hotza'ah, you want to take the stroller home just so that the stroller shouldn't get stolen. That you can't do. If it's a keli that's required for eichel nefesh, so then you could transport it. You do hotza'ah with that keli because it's an eichel nefesh need. But a stroller is not an eichel nefesh need. And the Mishnah Berurah says, we should be machmer like those shitas. I think if you look in the Aruch HaShulchan is not so machmer. Does also a different coil. Certainly, if you have another eitzah, if you have a way to protect the keli, you have somewhere to put it, or you have somebody trustworthy to leave it with, or let's say in the case of the key to your house, if you have the ability to lock the door and you have a very safe hiding place to hide the key, where you don't have to do hotza'ah on the key, according to the Mishnah Berurah, you should be machmer. Nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, hamachzorim shehaviyam b'Yom Tov lebeis hakneses. Let's say you went in the morning to shul and you brought your machzer with you, u'misyarei migneva, and you're afraid to leave your machzer in shul. You're afraid that your machzer will be stolen. Ava pisha ain't tzarich lehem oid b'Yom Tov. Even if you don't need that machzer anymore today, you don't need this machzer anymore today. You daven shachris, you daven musaf. Really, you could leave the machzer here. You're davening mincha in another shul where you know that they have a machzer there in the shul. Nobody needs the machzer at home, so there seems to be no Yom Tov need for carrying this machzer home. So how are you allowed to carry the machzer home? Says the Chavetz Chaim, mutter lahavim lebeisa. You're allowed to carry the machzer home l'divrei koil, according to everyone, even according to the more stringent opinions that say that hotza'ah is only l'tzarech eichel nefesh. Why? Tiitiru seifad mishum tchilasan. Because this is a case where the Chazal were matir, they were matir you to do something later on account of what they want you to do earlier. What's the explanation of this? The Chazal say, if we're not going to be matir you to bring the machzer home, so you know you're going to have to leave your beautiful antique leather-bound art scroll machzer in the shul, and you're going to have to risk it getting stolen. You won't bring the machzer to shul, and then you won't daven like a mensch because you don't have your machzer. So because they want to make sure that you're going to bring the machzer to shul, they're matter you to bring the machzer home from shul. But if the shul has plenty of machzerim in the shul, so then so then what are you bringing it home for? If these are machzerim that always stay in the shul, I think that's what he means over here. Oh, what he means is we can't be matir soifai b'shum tchilasai. Let's say you brought your machzer to shul on Erev Yom Tov. So on Erev Yom Tov, your machzer was already in shul. So now what are we going to say? We're going to be matir you to bring the machzer home because otherwise you won't bring the machzer in the first place? No, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, why not? Why not? So what does he mean here? That it's munach kvar. What does he mean by that? Acha machzorim shemunachim bebeis hakneses mikvar. Yeah, I think that is what it means. What he's saying is that since you already brought the machzer to shul on Erev Yom Tov, we can't say that we're matter you to bring it home because otherwise you won't bring it in the first place. It was already there before Yom Tov, so it's there already. So we're matter you to bring it home on Yom Tov if you're bringing it there on Yom Tov, because we're matter the hotza'ah for you to bring it on Yom Tov, because that is a tzarech for. Once we're matter you to bring it, to do the hotza'ah, to bring it on Yom Tov, we're also matter you the hotza'ah of bringing it home on Yom Tov. But if you brought the machzor to shul on Erev Yom Tov, we would never matter the hotza'ah of bringing it on Yom Tov. You brought it on Erev Yom Tov. So the only hotza'ah that you want us to be matter is the hotza'ah that seems to be shaloi l'tzarech. That's the hotza'ah of bringing it home. That we're not going to be matir if you brought it to shul on Erev Yom Tov. Now, this is only according to the machmirim. This is only according to the stringent opinion who's not matir hotza'ah on Yom Tov when you're worried about geneva. But according to the matirim, according to the first opinion brought down here in the Mishnah Berurah, that you're allowed to even bring a stroller home, right? If you're afraid that the stroller is going to be stolen, so that would apply to this as well. Okay. Now let's continue with the words of the Mechaber. Top line in my Mishnah Berurah, it's near the end of the top line of Kuf Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, right by the Ois Kat Zayin for the Mishnah Berurah. So we said that hotza'ah, since hotza'ah is mutar l'tzarech echal nefesh, we say mitoich, and it's also mutar shaloi l'tzarech echal nefesh, as long as there's a tzarech k'tzas. And we had the examples. We had a child, daled minim, a sefer Torah, kalim. As long as there's some level of tzarech, as long as there's some need for these kalim, you're allowed to carry them on Yom Tov. And the Ramah said also, you're allowed to carry things on Yom Tov if you're afraid that they're going to get stolen, if they're going to get if you leave them wherever they are. Now the Mechaber continues, and the Mechaber says, Avol, however, avonim, stones that have absolutely no purpose on Yom Tov, you're walking in the street, so you want to bend down and pick up a rock and play with it in your hand and carry a rock. Aval avonim v'kiyotzeh or other things of that nature that have no tzarech at all, aser. Those you're not allowed to carry. That's aser. And let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Let's take a look. Mishnah Berurah is zayin aval avonim ritzon eloymar. What the Mechaber wants to say over here when he mentions stones, he means stam avonim, plain old stones. She'enam yuchadim lihishtamesh. We're not talking about, let's say, a big rock that you were miyached before Yom Tov to use as a doorstop. So that becomes a keli. Yuchadim, if it's a big stone that you set aside, you are meyached it, you are mechin it for use as a doorstop on Yom Tov, have it like my kelim. So now that's a keli. So, okay, if you say, I'm going over to my friend on Sukkot and I know he wants to prop the back door open so it's easier to go in and out from the sukkah with trays, and I remember last time I was there, he didn't have a doorstop, so I'm going to bring the doorstop with me. So then this stone is a keli. And since you want to use it as a doorstop by your friend, it has a tzarech k'tzas, and then you're allowed to carry it. When the Mechaber says you're not allowed to carry stones, that's stam avonim. Stam, you picked up a rock from the ground and you want to carry it with you in Rishus HaRabim. That you're not allowed to do. Aser, that you're not allowed to carry. Not only you're not allowed to carry it, says the Chavetz Chaim, I feel a betiltel. You're not even allowed to move it at all. It's a muktzah. It's aser betiltel. The chol shekei lahoitzi, certainly you're not allowed to perform hotza'ah with it. The less tzarech hayom klal. It has no point for today at all. So it's muktzah. Well, akama paiskim, and according to many paiskim, chayim malchus ala hotza'ah seilu rishus harabim. To perform hotza'ah with something that's mamish aloi l'tzarech, according to Taisus, according to the Rosh, that's an issa daraisa. You would be chayim malchus. Vafla Carmelis, and even if you're only doing hotza'ah d'Rabbanan, if you're taking it from Rishus HaYachid to a Carmelis, let's say most of our streets are probably not a Rishus HaRabbim d'Oraisa, they're a Carmelis, Yeshal Kalpanim is a d'Rabbanan, still it is a d'Rabbanan. Now the second line, let's see the words of the Ramah, Haggah, Umutter lischayk bekador afilu Rishus HaRabbim. You're allowed to play ball even in Rishus HaRabbim. You're allowed to play ball. Even though this is not much of a tzarech, it's only a tivul. It's only, relaxation. It's like going for a spazier, like going for a walk. You're playing ball a little bit. That you're also allowed to do. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and test. What the Rabbah wants to say is, even though generally when you play ball, you end up transporting the ball more than 4 amas in the Rishus HaRabbim, so that's bona fide hotza'ah, that's real hotza'ah, afilu hachi mutter. Still the Ramah says it's technically mutter. Tu bechlal tiul v'simchas Yom Tov. The tiul v'simchas Yom Tov. That's considered simchas Yom Tov. You're enjoying yourself, you're relaxing, you're playing a little ball. That's considered a tzarech Yom Tov, so that hotza'ah is mutter. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, Rashal Kosav, Marshal writes, the dvar temuhu lahatir zeh. It's a wonder to be matir this playing ball. Dein boy tzarech hayom klal. Marshal says, what, you're calling this a tzarech hayom? Is that tzarech Yom Tov? Not a tzarech. Elas chayk shel yaladim. It's a kid's game. V'hamach lahem. Leave it for them. Leave it for the kids. Avalig doilim shenai hagin came. But adults that are naive to go outside and play ball and Yom Tov, minig rahu. This is a terrible minig. Dein zeh simcha v'tiul. This is not simchas Yom Tov. Elasichas yaladim v'kalos roish. It's childish gameplay and it's kalos roish. And I think what the Marshal means over here when he says kalos roish, somebody could be playing, an adult could be playing ball outside, and you see he's laughing and he's having a grand old time. So what are you telling me? It's not simchas Yom Tov. He's having simcha. Look at him. Look how happy he is. So he's having simcha. Why don't you call that simchas Yom Tov? Why are you calling it kalos roish? Because Rabbi say it's kalos roish. What kalos roish means is it's lightheadedness. What's lightheadedness? Lightheadedness means this fellow does not have his priorities straight. He's not being serious. He's being lightheaded. He's not thinking. That's Yom Tov? Yom Tov is to go outside for an adult. Yom Tov is to go outside and play ball. Now, I'm not saying if somebody has the kids at home and he has no way to entertain the kids, and it's during COVID quarantine season, and the kids can't have play dates, and the kids are going out of their minds, so you want to go outside and have a catch with the kid. We're not talking about that. We're talking about over here, 2 adults, Shabbos Yom Tov afternoon, they decide they're going to go outside to Rishus HaRabbim and have a catch. That's not Simchas Yom Tov. You don't know what Simchas Yom Tov is. That's kalos roish. That's not being serious. That's being childish. That's being immature. Simchas Yom Tov is do something ruchniistic, do something spiritually uplifting, do something meaningful. Talk about something meaningful. At least spend family time. At least connect with your spouse. But do something meaningful. Going outside and playing ball is not for an adult on Yom Tov. That's what the Marshal is saying. So the Marshal says, no, we can't be matir this. Not everybody agrees with this concept at all. The Dasa Mechaber Lesser, Kamavol El, B'Simin Shin Chesif Memhei, and El Chashavas, the Mechaber talks about this, about playing ball on Yom Tov, and he's not happy with it. When it comes to other kinds of games, Dinon Kamai B'Shabbos, the halacha on Yom Tov is the same as the halacha on Shabbos. Umavur le'el b'simin shinlam l'chesif hey, and I believe what the Mishnah Berurah is referring to over here is a discussion in Siman Shinlam l'ches about playing things like nuts, where yes, you could play nuts, but you can't play nuts on an earthen floor, because you might come to be mashve gumos. If you're playing on an earth floor, you're playing with nuts and you want to roll the nuts. So if the ground is not smooth, it's going to hit pebbles, it's going to bounce out of the way. So you might come to smooth out the ground. Ooh, now suddenly you get into trouble. You're going to be hashvaz, gumais, filling up holes. Now you're going to get into toldos of boina and toldos of chayrish. So there you could have actual malacha problems. So you can't play on an earth floor, but you could play in the air. You could play ala shulchan on a table. Continues the Ramah. Right by the ice cut and yud for the Mishnah Berurah. Erev. Let's say we're talking about an area where you have an Erev. So you want to go outside and carry something on Yom Tov, but there's an Erev. Then mutal taltal ulahaitzi. Then you could be metaltal, you could handle, and you could perform hotza'ah, you could carry kol sheyesh lo teres kli. Anything that has a Yom Tov use, anything that's a keli and has a Yom Tov use, as opposed to, let's say, a stone. You still can't be metaltal a stone, even though you have an Erev. The stone is muktzah. But you want to carry a keli, you want to take a stroller, even without a kid. So why can't you? There's no problem here. Even though there's no tzarich, there's no hotza'ah problem because you have an Erev. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting yud. If you made an Erev. Now the first thing you have to understand, and we spoke about this many times when we were back in the interesting days of Chelik Daled, when we were learning all the halachas of Erevin and Eruvei Chatzeros. What we refer to as an Erev is not an Erev. We always call the Erev the lechis and the strings. That's what we call an Erev. Yes, there's an Erev. That's not an Erev. That's a tzuras HaPesach. We make an Erev, we put up lechis and we put strings across, so we enclose an area with multiple tzuras HaPesach, with multiple forms of doorways, so that everything inside that Erev should be considered a Rishos HaYachid. But that's not what's called the Erev. And the Erev is a reference to the Eruvei Chatzeros. After we make our lechis and our strings, and we make everything this Rishos HaYachid, we still need to make it Eruvei Chatzeros. Because my house, your house, the Rishos HaRabim, everything is included in this big Erev that we made. But how am I allowed to carry from my house to the outside? How am I allowed to carry from my house to your house? How are we allowed to do any of this? Only because we make it a Eruvei Chatzeros. That's what's really called the Erev. The Erev is the Eruvei Chatzeros. So over here, the Mishnah Berurah is telling me, when the Ramah says that if you made an Erev, you're allowed to carry on Yom Tov even shaloi l'tzarich, what the Ramah wants to say is, she'iniach Eruvei Chatzeros, that you made it a Eruvei Chatzeros, milavad ma she'asa tikkun mevuos be'ir, besides closing up all the openings and making what we call an Erev. Then you could carry from one chatzar to another. Afilu derech hamavui. You could even go from one chatzar to another chatzar through the mavui, because you incorporated everything together and you made it a Eruvei Chatzeros. Well, mashma, the implication is that if you did not make it a Eruvei Chatzeros, then you wouldn't be allowed to carry something with his no tzarich, even going from one chatzar to another on Yom Tov, or from a house to a chatzar on Yom Tov. So what the Mishnah Berurah is telling me is, the clear implication of the Ramah is that the din of Eruvei Chatzeros applies on Yom Tov the same way it applies on Shabbos. When are you allowed to carry something shaloi l'tzarech on Yom Tov? If you have an Erev and you made it a Eruvei Chatzeros. But if you did not make it a Eruvei Chatzeros on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to carry from your house to the chatzar, because you needed a Eruvei Chatzeros. And this happens to be a machlokes rishonim. V'ayin le'el siman tav tes zayin b'soif, v'ayin le'kaman b'siman tav kuf chav ches, the sasam ha'mechaber, that the mechaber rules, kedas ha'paiskim, like the opinion of the paiskim, the loy tikdu Eruvei Chatzeros klal b'Yom Tov, that there is no din of Eruvei Chatzeros on Yom Tov. And really, for hotza'ah on Yom Tov, you don't need an Eruvei Chatzeros. On Yom Tov, you're allowed to carry from one chatzar to another, even without an Eruvei Chatzeros. U'mutar l'haitzi b'chatzar l'chatzar, mi'bayis l'chatzar, afilu davar she'en b'tzarech hayom klal. But the Ramah over here, Sasam Kedas HaMachmirin Bazeh. He's being machmir, and he's saying, like the Rashba, that you do need a Eruvei Chatzeros in Yom Tov. And it says the Chavetz Chaim will appella. This is really a pella. Shlo higir sham klum, because the Ramah in these other places, he didn't argue on the mechaber. For Ashal Kosav, the Ashal writes, Shanaygin Shaloi Lases Eruvei Chatzeros for Yom Tov, that our minig is not to make it a Eruvei Chatzeros for Yom Tov. Ukadasa mechaber, like the opinion of the mechaber, ve'ein l'shanis haminig. Umikamakim, nevertheless, l'chatchila kishema arev Eruvei Chatzeros be'erev Pesach l'chol Shabsos Hashana. When we make it Eruvei Chatzeros on erev Pesach, that was the minig, to set up an Eruvei Chatzeros on erev Pesach and say that this Eruvei Chatzeros works for the whole year. Yichlal gam Yom Tov, you should set aside the Eruvei Chatzeros for Yom Tov too. So that you could cover the opinion of the Machmirim here. V'dan, you should know, even if you're talking about being moitzi, utensils that are needed for oichel nefesh on Yom Tov, like a knife, if you finished your suda, and you're not going to need it anymore, so you went to eat your suda by somebody, and the fellow told you, you know what, do you have a very sharp knife that I could cut the roast with? Could you bring it? And I said, yeah, I have my roast knife. I'll bring my good knife. So now you brought the knife to your chaver. Now the suda is over. Are you allowed to bring the knife home? Yes, it's a keli that's used for oichel nefesh. It's a knife, but you don't need it anymore. You already finished the suda. So what heter do you have to carry it? So over there, the Chavetz Chaim says, also he wouldn't be allowed to bring it. However, there are those that are makel specifically by knives. Why? Maybe on the way home, somebody will give you a nice apple, and you'll have to slice the apple. However, if you're reasonably certain that you're not going to need a knife, you're going to shul, nobody's giving me an apple, then certainly you would not be allowed to carry the knife with you because you don't have a Yom Tov use for it anymore. Ice cutting at Aleph, you're allowed to carry anything as long as you have an area. You're allowed to carry anything. Kol sheyesh lo yitaris kli, as long as it's considered a keli. Aval avonim, but stones that have no purpose at all. Gavna also mishum muktzah. Those would be aser because they are muktzah. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Schos of limud HaTorah should be made against Klal Yisrael. Rabbanim Shalom should send Yeshua's, Refuas, Parnasa, everything to all those in need. And Mirza Hashem, I'll see you tomorrow. Be well.